This one, again, is called Not Every Shadow is a Ghost, and it's by Jay Wilburn. I don't know any other way to say it other than some crazy shit was going on that night, and I seemed to be the only one who really noticed. My wife Beth and both kids, Julia and Tommy, were sick. That's usually enough to get me out of parties, especially ones I don't want to go to. Hell, we've lied about the kids being sick just for that reason. There was going to be a lot of family there, older family, so not bringing illness in the house should have been a perfect excuse. They had food poisoning for something they ate, and I didn't. I can't pass that on, but everyone would have understood. All right. Two at once, man. You were over deeper in the book already. Thanks, man. Yeah, every stream I typically, basic every stream, I write a new story from scratch. I edit the story from the previous day, and then I'll read a story that's been completed. Like I've done some edits off screen, and have kind of gotten it to its final draft form. So that's pretty much the pattern for every stream. Occasionally, I'll add on like a fourth block that's like a article or something that either I've written or somebody else has written about writing, and I'll share that and talk about it and discuss it with folks too. So that usually gets me up to around the 2 to 3 hour mark, which is kind of my goal with streaming, just because that kind of fits better with the culture of folks. What about the play party? That, like, I have to do some of that off stream. I used to play a little bit of Minecraft on here too, and I still do it occasionally, because it's the only game I know how to play, and my 8 year old taught me how to play. So sometimes I'll do that on here, but not as often as I used to. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, you got to play, but sometimes that's off stream there. All right, I guess I'm going on about this because I so desperately wish I had never gone to that party that night. My wife works for her uncle, who lives a couple doors down from us. There's a golf course he owns on the other side of the street from our nice big lots. Um, Behind our houses, just through the trees, is the river. This is prime property. Her uncle, Rex Dole III, owns the course, holds the mortgage to our house that we pay him in cash, and he owns a lot of surrounding land of the surrounding land and town. Beth wanted me to make an appearance and offer my apologies for her. Problem was that it was a dinner party with several courses, with conversation and mingling and such between. Once I was there for the haul. It wasn't so bad at first. I strolled in. Everyone was greeting and joking and drinking, of course. Neighborhood folks were there. I like a few of them. Uncle Rex's business friends were there. I like a couple of them and can avoid the rest. Then other family filled out the room along with their kids. I like my kids. I don't much care for other people's kids. Beth's family, I like in small doses and not all at once. But I was there, so I circulated the crowd and nodded through droning conversations. Each time I got bored, I pointed to someone else across the room who wasn't even looking at me and excused myself to start the cycle over again with somebody else. All right, I'm going to add a little piece in here. I was. No, he would. This is him talking first person. I am terrible with names and personal details. I can't ever keep track of who is married, divorced, pregnant, or anything else. All right. Have you read The Elements of Style by Strunk and White? They say it's a universal style guide for creative writing and is indeed very short. I have only read like half of it though. I have read that, I believe, but it's been a while. I like a bunch of on writing type books. There's the one by Stephen King I've loved and found that helpful. Tim Wagner is a professor who's also a really accomplished writer, and I like his as well. There's also a book by John Urbancic on writing and creativity, and I love that one too. John Urbancic is a short story. He's a writer. I think he's one of the greatest short story writers of all time. And he's also a photographer and stuff, so he had a lot to say on creativity. But yeah, I eat those kind of books up. I really need to revisit that one, just because it's kind of back to basics kind of stuff, and it never hurts to read those more than once. All right. I'm terrible with those details. Beth always joked with me that I fill that part of my brain with movie trivia instead. That bad spot in my memory was part of what made this night so terrifying. All right. So I wanted to add that in to kind of pull together a theme I'm going to hit later on in this story. Glass broke outside on the sprawling flagstone patio overlooking the river. It turned out to be three full bottles of wine. Wine bottles. I guess it was turning into that kind of party. Then I saw him, and my whole night changed. I swear to God, I thought Mitchell Creek was dead. But there he was, actually cradling a guitar as he talked to a few other neighbors, not quite as old as him, but real close. I just stared. Someone stopped by me, touched my arm, and carried on a whole conversation by themselves as I nodded, grunted, and tried to figure out why no one else thought it was weird that a dead man had joined the party. My wife hates it when I just say yeah and okay at the right spots while she's talking. Whoever had my arm didn't seem to notice as I tried to put the pieces together. I almost texted Beth to ask if Mitchell had died. She was sick, so I decided to leave her out of it. The neighborhood old folks did golf on Tuesdays and Thursdays, followed by afternoon drinking, let's say. Need to change the text there, context. All right. Jerry Jenkins had said he reads that book every time before starting a new book, and he has written like hundreds. Wow, that's pretty amazing. Those are the kind of books you do need to read a couple times. I know that I read On Writing by Stephen King early on. My wife got it as a gift, like right after I went full time. And when I read through it, I just felt like it was packed with so much information I couldn't take it all in. And then I reread it again recently because I was rereading all of Stephen King's books in order. And when I reread that one, it felt pretty simple, like pretty concise and not a lot of information. So like I was two completely different people the times I wrote it. So if you find a really good book like that on writing style, it doesn't hurt to read it more than once, partly because who you are when you first begin writing and who you are later on are completely different. You have different skills, and there are things that you kind of want to remind yourself from earlier on that sometimes you forget. But that's pretty impressive, reading it every single time you're about to write a book. That would be a bit much, I think. I don't know if I could handle that. All right. The neighborhood folks did. Yeah, it can get overwhelming reading all those books. I still find some hard to grasp. I like moving around a little bit too. So like finding them from other folks, and then especially some people that kind of write the same genre as you. You can get a little more specific. But I tend to eat those books up. I always end up grabbing them, especially if it's an author that I respect a great deal. The neighborhood old folks did golf on Tuesdays and Thursdays, followed by afternoon drinking. Okay, I fixed that. Mitchell was wearing his golf shirt and had that leathery old man tan going. Okay, I tried to fit the pieces of what I remembered. I remembered him going to the emergency room that last night. I remembered him going... No, I want to say emergency room. I remembered him going to the hospital. That last time because I cut my leg pretty bad working in the yard, and Beth drove me to the emergency room. So this is where I'll use emergency room. The emergency room. Right past Mitchell's house. While did I do two L's there? Okay. I have spelled his name two different ways all the way through this, and I will probably need to check that for sure on some future passes. Right past Mitchell's house, where his wife stood outside as they loaded him into the ambulance that took him away forever. I remember a conversation with Rex where he said, let's say Uncle Rex. That's going to be important later. I had a conversation with Uncle Rex where he said that when they tried to save Mitchell, his arteries and heart had been as hard as a rock in some places, but thin as paper in others. It was a wonder he lived that long. They took up a collection for his wife. Beth and I put in a little. They were working on a fountain in the pond on the 18th green as a memorial. Mitchell put down the guitar, and I heard him complain about the neighbor's grass being too high. That sounded like him. Didn't sound like something a dead guy would say. Let's say a dead guy would care about. That's a little funnier. Okay. All right, moving right along. I almost grabbed Rex's arm as he patted my shoulder and kept walking. Patted my shoulder, but kept walking, let's say. But what the hell was I supposed to say? Well, first thing is you got to put a question mark at the end of that, man. This narrator needs to get it together. Isn't that guy over there complaining about the neighbors like old times supposed to be dead? Those funny quips are gold. Thanks, man. All right. There was no one I could talk to about this. Maybe I could ask Mitchell himself. Hell, he might get a kick out of it. The idea of looking into his eyes after I saw him loaded into an ambulance filled me with ice water. Maybe it was Michael, I muttered out loud. Okay, that made more sense. Michael was old as hell, too. He lived around the corner from us. Maybe I was confused about which old dude everyone had been talking about dying. That would have been embarrassing if I'd said something. We all sat down at various tables around the house, not everyone in the same room. Mitchell and his wife sat at the far end of the table I got sat at. Across from me were my wife's cousin, her husband, and their little kids, Ashley and Freddie. I hadn't seen them for years, but they looked great. Ashley could barely see up over the table, but she was well behaved, a nice reprieve from most of the kids running around the house. I remembered years ago at the last reunion we were both at that Freddie pushed his little sister into the water, and I had to fish her out. I was still spooked by my misidentification of who had died. My eyes kept drifting to the other end of the table as I nodded through the conversations around me. The food was a little rich for me, but I got through it. As we started to get up for a break between courses, all the strength went out of my legs. Mitchell was going on about the mailbox keys. He worked with the homeowners association on that bit. People didn't like dealing with him on the lost keys. I couldn't stand without holding the chair because my heart was racing again. It was Mitchell who died. I knew it. The memorial fountain was across from his house, so his widow could see it, the same widow who was on his arm right then as he went on about the damn mailbox keys. I tried to think it through. Maybe this was Michael. I was confusing him for Mitchell because their names were alike, and they were both men in their mid to late 80s. Maybe I had confused their names with each other the whole time I lived here. That wouldn't be great, but better than a dead man walking around with only me noticing. That did look like Mitchell's wife, though. I am still doing one L. Didn't help that I flipped over to Michael, so I need to be sure I'm doing two L's when I write Mitchell. I found somewhere else to go in the house and somewhere else to sit for the next course. I started drinking a little more than I tended to on a typical night. As we dug into some meat and potatoes this time, I froze mid-bite. It wasn't Mitchell this time, although he was not far from my mind. Ashley and Freddie had still been little kids. I just saw them earlier and didn't piece together that they were still the same age as the last time I saw them years ago. The girl's hair was different, and Freddie seemed calmer, which gave him the appearance of being older, but they hadn't aged a day. I could see the parents not looking all that much older. Some folks can still look young, going from their 20s to their 30s. Not me, but some people. Kids change a lot, though, especially when they are young. How long had it been? I wanted to say 5 years, but I think it was closer to 7 or 8 years since I pulled that little girl out of the pool. The Mitchell who cradled a guitar at the start is 80, not the image that came to mind at first. Oh, okay. I may need to mention that he's older there, so maybe that's a thing I need to mention earlier. All right. That's a good point. It makes him sound younger. So maybe on a second pass I might need to put his age in sooner. Can't be, I said. That it just can't be. Maybe it was 2 or 3 years. I need to put years down here. That still didn't make a lot of sense, but it would be better. I sat there with my fork hovering over my plate trying to put together a timeline. We took that trip when we still lived in another state. That was 5 years minimum, but probably closer to 8, I said. Someone stopped us all to give a toast. It sounded like Uncle Rex had a bit of a cough. His throat rumbled as he talked about family, friends, and time spent together. At the end of it, Uncle Rex said, Uncle Rex, without a gravelly throat, said, "Thanks, Dad. That was wonderful." Everyone around the table spoke over one another in agreement. I turned my head in time to see Uncle Rex helping his father, Rex Dole II, back into his wheelchair. Now I couldn't swallow. I knew that guy was dead. I knew it. He used to live in the house that Uncle Rex Dole III. Here's where I messed up. I'm getting my Uncle Rex Doles mixed up. Where Uncle Rex Dole III used to live in the house that Uncle Rex Dole III rented to us and then mortgaged to us. The doorways were extra wide for that wheelchair. The toilets were extra high. Anytime I stopped at a bathroom outside my house, I felt like I was falling when I sat down. Our house was built for Uncle Rex's aging parents. His mom had died first, and then Rex the second, getting my Rexes mixed up here, then Rex the second shortly after from an infection in his leg from a scratch he got golfing. Got, let's say, off a thorn bush. Off a thorn bush while golfing. We attended the funeral a month before we moved into the house. There was no denying this. Was Rex II going to come back home with me because he thought it was still his house? Need to put a question mark there. All right. If I saw Uncle Rex's mom roll in here, I might die right on the spot myself. Of course, at this party, that may not have made any difference. I dropped my fork with a clatter, pushed back my chair, and worked my way through the house into the outside patio. A couple men from Rex's business world stood off to one side smoking. I wandered the other way and tried to draw in as much of the night air as I could. I happened to look through the bright windows and saw Mitchell leaning down to talk to little Ashley and Freddie, 2 kids that stopped aging almost a decade ago. Sweat broke out on my forehead and I felt dizzy. Another voice locked me cold. Okay, let me throw something else out here. I could hear... I could, let's say imagine. I could imagine dead Mitchell with his bad heart saying, "You guys are growing up so fast. If only that were true." All right. Sweat broke out on my forehead and I felt dizzy. Another voice locked me cold. I didn't want to turn around because I knew what I would see, but I still told myself I was hearing things. I was making this all up in my head. But I did turn. I had to. Sure enough, the voice matched the face. Greg Dole, my wife's late brother, stood there smoking a cigarette with 2 of Rex Dole III's business associates. Greg was talking computers and copiers. That's what he did 5 years before he died. 5 years before when he died. Beth attended the funeral while I kept the kids with me. That's how she wanted it. But still got mad about it with me for not being there later. I go before. Okay. I'll have to check there. I missed whatever you're talking about. I kept my distance and let her grieve. It was a rough couple of years after we first moved into the house. She hurt badly and I didn't know how to fix it. Holidays were the worst. She still got sad, but not like before. Let me make that a new paragraph so it's clear that something's changed. All right. It made me mad to see him. She was just getting back to normal, and here he stood in this party of dead people. If Beth had come, she would be broken-hearted to see him again, whatever this vision was. I was angry at her brother for coming back from the dead and standing here smoking. All right, let me fix up typo there. Standing here smoking 2 doors down from his sister, who still wasn't completely over his loss. As I moved back inside, he glanced at me. It was the first of the dead I had seen tonight who now looked on me directly. For a second, I could tell myself that it was just some guy that looked like Greg. That was the only explanation for any of this. I was losing my mind enough to mistake every apparition I had seen tonight. Then he nodded at me. It had to be him. That was exactly how he nodded. I turned away and stormed back inside. I told myself that anyone could nod that way, but I didn't believe it. All right, let me add, anybody could nod that way. There. Anybody could nod that way. Let me do a fancy semicolon. There were only so many ways to nod, but I didn't believe it. Okay, there we go. I passed Ashley in my wife's cousin's arms. My mind insisted that maybe I didn't save her from the pool. Maybe she died too. It wasn't true, but I felt the bile climbing up the back of my throat. I passed Mitchell, talking to Rex Dole II in his wheelchair. Mitchell turned toward me and called to my back, "Hey, I have a question when you have a second." I rushed out the door and down the dark street toward home. Let's say I didn't want to know. Didn't want to know what his question from beyond the grave might be. All right, there we go. Well, let's do a period instead of a comma there. That would be a fine way to finish that sentence. All right, we're in the home stretch here. Stopping at the end of my driveway, I made a tough choice. I wasn't telling Beth about any of this, not about her brother. I feared it would trigger something in her and we'd be back in the depths of those endless dark days from before. I couldn't ask her about people I was sure had died. She'd look at me like I was crazy, or she'd tell me that none of those people had died. I was clearly mistaken. All right. Either way, talking about it was just inviting the dark magic of that party into my own home. I didn't want whatever evil or whatever delusion was involved to follow me here, so I kept all my fears and all my secrets to myself up until now. I have found an excuse for every single one of Uncle Rex's parties since then. When Beth goes alone with the kids, I fear I will never see them again. When she comes back, I ask if she saw anyone interesting, like your dead brother, I think, but never say that out loud. She always says, "If you care to know, you should come next time, you homebody." All right, let me put a comma there because she's addressing him. I laugh along, but the truth is, I don't care to know. I don't care to see who might be making a surprise appearance. Okay, let me fix that. Who might be making a surprise appearance, nor who might have aged, who may not have aged even a single day. All right. So, there, I got a weird figure there. So I'm telling you that's why I'm not going to that party tonight, and I want you to keep all of this to yourself.